Welcome to your Taurus eclipse horoscopes, coming up on the 28th of October 2023 at 5 degrees of Taurus. In this video, we'll be discussing how the planetary energies of this lunar eclipse will be showing up in your own birth chart and which life areas might be being activated for you. The best advice I would follow, best advice might not be quite right. The most accurate way to track your own horoscopes is to track your rising sign, but you can also look for your sun and your moon sign. If you know your rising sign, then fantastic. This is based on your exact birth time, so be sure to check in on some free astrology software like astro.com, or AstroSeek is also very good, or SolarFire or AstroGold to locate your rising sign or your ascendant. So the rising sign is basically the degree of the zodiac sign that was rising on the eastern horizon at the exact time that you were born, and this says so much about your personality, and it sets up the whole house system. So 12 cheese wedges of a birth chart circle that's chopped into 12, and each of those cheese wedges represents a different life area. And so when you set your horoscopes from your rising sign, it locates the transit of, in this case, the full moon lunar eclipse in Taurus into the specific Taurus house in your birth chart. Whereas if you're looking at your sun sign, unless you've got Taurus sun sign in the first house in your birth chart, it might not necessarily represent accurately the life area where you'll be feeling this eclipse the most. So now we've got that out of the way, just a little bit, I've got notes today, just a little bit of kind of admin really. So recently I put a post up on Instagram to say that my readings were full until the end of 2023, and I'm so grateful. Thank you so much to everybody that's had a reading this year. I just feel so blessed to have had such a fantastic year of readings. So I was going to close down spaces, but instead what I've done is actually add a few extra spaces in. So we now have some more spaces for one-to-one astrology consultations in the months of October and November, which is really exciting. So if you've been looking to get a reading and you want to get one in before the end of the year, then head over to the website freyastrology.com and look at my availability to book in. And the other thing is that the Astrology Almanac, which is a big project of this year, is all set to be released. I'm aiming for a Halloween release, basically. And so this is going to be a release for the digital version. The printed version is still kind of up in the air as to whether or not I'll be able to get that done in time for the end of this year, but I'm really hoping so. And I've put lots of feelers out to try and get all of the printing and binding sorted for that one, but it is such a huge task. Yeah, so the digital version will be available, and I'm still setting the price for that at the moment, so I will let you know as soon as I know. So Astrology Almanac, just a little bit about that. It is basically a whole year's worth, so 12 months worth of planner, diary planner. So it's got all the accurate dates like a normal diary planner would have. But the thing that makes this one special is that it has all of the transit information for the whole of 2024 in it. It's got all of the new moons, all of the full moons. It's got special pages for new moon intention setting. It has got special pages for full moon manifestation, realizations. It has got, I don't even know if I should tell you this. This is like a bit of a secret, but my favorite thing about the whole planner, I think, other than the artwork, which is bloody amazing, by the way, and that is by Phoenix Feathers Art on Instagram. Follow her, Louise, she's amazing. Follow her for some amazing, incredible artwork. She just has this absolutely magical way with the glow when it comes to the moon, and that was ultimately why I was like, you are the artist, you are the magic that needs to join me in this creation, which I've been planning for many, many years. So it was a real kind of magical moment earlier in this year, very serendipitous the way that we ended up working together. So she's done some incredible artwork, which I cannot wait to share with you all, which really just honours how special I want this almanac to be. Just getting a bit excited there. So, and what else? Yes, so there is going to be, this is the secret bit, there is going to be, for every single month, of 2024, there will be a whole page dedicated to working with your own transits in your own birth chart, so super personalized, but it's also a learning aid, so it's a bit of a guide as well as an almanac or a teaching resource. In that, I feel a bit like Monica, you know, when she's like, let's control the fun. Let's make sure it's useful fun. Always put the lids back on the pens. Am I making any sense to anybody? This is Friends references, probably inappropriate for the for the audience, but there we go. So there's something like there's learning, there's like something to activate your brain. It's not a passive resource, this almanac. It's very much getting yourself engaged, getting your fingers stuck into the weeds, getting stuck in the mud, really digging deep into your own psyche and your own personality, really getting in there. And these pages will be a blank birth chart where you can set your own rising sign, and then it will set the whole sign house systems. It is set to whole sign houses this year. Potentially we could play around with that over the coming years, but yeah, for this year, whole sign houses. And you will be able to spotlight specific transits for yourself, or if you're, if that feels a bit intense, maybe just start with a new moon intention for every single month, and locating where that new moon will be falling in your birth chart, because this is what we always talk about when we're talking about horoscopes. Where is this falling in your birth chart? Is it in your 5th house, your 9th house, your 12th house, to activate those specific life areas? And so I'm really excited that we're going to have this page where you can just get stuck into your own birth chart, all of the symbols for the planets, all of the symbols for the zodiac signs, and the symbols for the aspects. Again, if that's too much information, just stick to plotting your own new moons for the whole of the 12 months, or just 1 month. If you just want to kind of feel your way into it, that's fine. This is just kind of, if you were going to use the planner to its absolute kind of optimum, this planner is kind of aimed for absolute beginners, intermediate and advanced astrologers, so it covers everybody. And it came about from the fact that I have always wanted this planner for myself, and I thought, if I want it, surely other people will want it as well. And that is kind of really where my heart kind of starts to beat fast, and I get excited about this, because it's like, this is something that I've always wanted to use. And instead of having scraps of paper around the house, and sometimes writing the words of transits, and sometimes drawing little symbols and things, it's like, actually, let's bring it all together and have it in one place, so that when we're thinking about astrology, and it's going to be A5 as well when it comes to the printed version, but obviously it's going to be on your phone or on your tablet, on your digital devices, so you've always got it on you. And so if you suddenly think, oh, I've just had a bit of a crap morning, like I wonder what the planets are doing, as I do probably every day, like, oh, I've just had a really nice chance meeting with someone in the street, what are the planets doing? And kind of like looking into that kind of thing, then it means that it's always going to be on you and in your pocket, and editable, is that a word? So that you can like track your own images and no, that's not what I mean. Track your own transits, so putting those little astrological glyphs, zodiac symbols and aspect symbols into your own chart, basically. And like I said, there's one for every single month. So it's really exciting. You can really like learn so much from this. And I'm hoping to be running it alongside, I feel a bit, I shouldn't be saying this, but this is like all about the revelations, this video. I'm going to be running it also alongside the membership space, yet to be named. I used to run an astrology membership called Hermetica, which was amazing. I had to pull back from that when my second child was very young. Now he's getting older. I feel like there's more space to add in a membership again. So the membership you won't have to be a part of a membership to buy the almanac. But it will complement it really nicely, and we will get together regularly to kind of use it. It will be part of our kind of study guide over the months of 2024, and it will be a like a subscription, so you can kind of sign up for 1 month, you can sign up for 3 months, you can sign up for 12 months, and there'll be kind of various tiers for the subscriptions. There'll be live classes, they will be meetings at various auspicious transit points in the sky and things like that. So anyway, enough about the almanac, blimey. So I think that is all the notes covered. Let's move into horoscopes for this Taurus eclipse. And so starting with Aries, as always, Aries, this eclipse will be falling in your second house of personal resources, self-worth, also the idea of the foods that we like to put into our body can live in the second house. And this is very much how you build your own wealth. And because we've got a full moon eclipse, it will be a lot of light around the whole situation. So if you've been struggling in terms of like material resources, this eclipse can kind of help come along and show you, you know, where you need to kind of fine tune some of the details if it's been a bit of a struggle, or maybe you've just been waiting for some money to come in and this full moon eclipse can kind of finally manifest some of that material wealth into your world. Mercury, so whenever we have a full moon, the sun and moon are exactly opposite. So the sun will be at 5 degrees of Scorpio and the moon will be at 5 degrees of Taurus. The fact that it's an eclipse point is just because this particular full moon falls very close to the nodes of the moon, north node, south node. So the north node is in Aries right now, south node is in Libra. But this one crosses the sign boundary a little bit. So this is the last Taurus eclipse that we're going to have for the next 9.5 years. When the south node will be in Taurus, and 18.5 years when the north node will be in Taurus again. So, you know, big chapters, closing, finishing, completion points. And also with the sun in Scorpio during this eclipse, during the chart for this eclipse, we've got Mercury and Mars in Scorpio, fairly closely conjunct the sun, and therefore feeding into the story of this full moon. And Mercury and Mars bring in the mind, they bring in passion and drive. I would be possibly slightly aware of kind of mental health flare-ups at this time because Mars is a malefic planet, so it can be a bit spiky. So just being mindful of your own mental health and perhaps self-sabotaging as well, the idea of that may come into play. The host of this eclipse is Venus because Venus rules Taurus, where the eclipse is falling, or landing, should I say. And Venus is currently in Virgo. So Virgo was also where Venus was when we had the new moon eclipse in Libra back on the 14th of October. And so Venus kind of tends to struggle a little bit when she's in the sign of Virgo, because she is relying on Mercury for the information, and Venus wants to be sensual and all about the physical experience and activating the senses, and Mercury wants to know facts and details. So Venus in Virgo can sometimes add this sense of being a little bit nitpicking around anything to do with finances or relationships, love affairs, these sorts of things. But I feel like this could be really quite useful for you guys, Aries rising, because if you're needing to look at the details and the systems around your whole personal finance system or your personal finance story, then Venus in Virgo is actually quite useful for this. And then we've got Mercury also opposing this full moon, which is quite powerful in terms of details and information. In the sign of Scorpio, it's thinking about intuitive information that's coming in as well, kind of thinking like maybe, oh, actually, I'm not going to go out and buy myself a takeaway coffee today. I'm going to have a coffee at home because I just know that I need to just be a little bit steady around resources right now, especially with that malefic Mars there involved as well. Let's just check. Yes, there's also a fairly loose conjunction from Jupiter in Taurus, which really kind of helps lift some of this experience. And make it more of a kind of opportunity and more kind of lucky. So actually finances may just be feeling a little bit more beneficial at this time, as opposed to negative. And maybe it's kind of like getting your shit together, you know, and kind of just being like, no, I'm going to start budgeting and I really mean it now. And I know that I can achieve this right now, and really kind of going for it. And because Jupiter is retrograde, it's actually applying by a retrograde motion, which just means that this isn't something brand new. This is an idea that you've had before that is feeding into this full moon eclipse light, and it's opportunistic, and in terms of material resources, and any kind of connections to nature as well are also well favored. It's also sextile to Saturn in Pisces, which is also retrograde, which is going direct in November. And so again, there is some information here that's coming through probably on an intuitive level. Pay attention to your dreams around where have you had to be responsible about your own personal finances? Where have you had to kind of be a bit of an adult about your sense of self-worth? And where are you kind of, this gives me a strong kind of independence vibe as opposed to relying on other people. So it feels like that's, you know, again, a big part of the story for Aries rising. Taurus rising. Still recording, brilliant. Taurus rising, this eclipse will be taking place in your first house of self, body, psychology, the way that you view the world, your window to the world, your front door to the world. And so Taurus risings, this is a really big time to check in with how are you feeling? How are you finding things just generally at this time? How have the last kind of couple of years been building up to this moment of, you know, a full array of light around who you are as a person and how you kind of show up and your connection to the material world. And is everything still kind of working for you in relation to your relationship to the material world? Is it supporting who you are as a person? Is it nourishing your vitality and your health? Or is it somehow holding you back? Is that Taurus is being a fixed earth sign is quite unaccepting of the idea of change. It's fixed, you know, it's fixed earth. So it's very much feet on the ground and I'm standing here and I'm holding myself here and I don't want to move. And so when you get a fixed sign ruling your birth chart or a fixed sign as your ascendant, then it can feel quite difficult to integrate new changes. But this is a full moon light of, you know, completion points. Where have you been working really hard to kind of come back to yourself? Where have you been working really hard to nourish yourself from a sensual standpoint? Maybe you are finding that actually when you eat more regularly, that, you know, maybe over the last 2 years you've been eating more regularly and actually it's really supporting who you are as a person. And that Venus in Virgo that's ruling this eclipse would also be helping add into that story as well of health and nourishment and just kind of doing those things that sometimes can feel a bit ploddy and a bit repetitive, but are actually quite important to maintaining equilibrium within the body. Yeah, and with Mercury and Mars opposing this eclipse, just being mindful of energy levels and again mental health, but also allowing passions and things that you can't see in the tangible world, maybe having a little sense of trusting your intuition and allowing some emotional information to come in to inform the material, literally what you can see in front of you. Very Taurus idea, this very material connection to the world, allowing the intuitive stuff to come in and allowing your gut feelings to actually bubble up and inform a little bit about your current journey with your own body and your own sense of psychology as well. And again, that sextile to Saturn in Pisces is just emphasizing that the idea of allowing some intuition to come through, allowing a bit more rest to come through, and having a bit of a balance when it comes to the idea of just taking your own energy level seriously and your own body seriously. Again, we've got Jupiter retrograde applying back to a conjunction with this full moon. So Jupiter retrograde in Taurus, which is very beneficial. Jupiter has this expansive quality, and so you may find that you're putting on a bit of weight at this time, potentially. Maybe this full moon makes you realise, actually, I'm not comfortable being at this weight and I want to do something about that. And this full moon light can kind of show where our excesses have been taking place. It doesn't have to be about weight, it can also be finances. Perhaps you've been spending too much, something like that. And there is some knowledge and wisdom to come through from the things that you've learned about spending too much. Oh, you know, there's nothing left in the pot and I need to kind of rein it in a little bit. Or you know, perhaps you have been quite good at managing finances, not good, but, you know, quite detailed and methodical about managing finances, and you realize there's a bit left in the pot because of that. And Jupiter offers this, like, oh, okay, maybe I can treat myself to that new hat or that new pair of shoes or whatever it is that gets you going. You know, for Taurus, perhaps it would be like a day out in nature, some kind of like nature spa in the woods or something like that. So I'm really liking this Jupiter for you guys, Taurus rising. Gemini rising, this will be taking place in your 12th house, slightly more difficult house to see. The 12th house is typically known as our personal blind spot because there's no traditional aspect made between the first house and the 12th house. That's the technical term. But moving on from that, it's much more connected to our subconscious, and it can take, when we have an eclipse in our 12th house, it can take us a little bit longer to realize what is the actual kind of message from the eclipse that's trying to come through. And for Gemini, you know, you guys love the messages, you love the information, you love the facts, and here sometimes it can be a little bit like, hang on a minute, I can't quite see what's going on. There is positive support in your case, Gemini, from the fact that Venus is hosting this eclipse and it's in the sign of Virgo. Virgo and Gemini both ruled by Mercury, so very much of the information. So that's a little bit of a kind of relieving factor for this eclipse, that gradually the information can come in, but it can feel a bit frustrating at the time of the eclipse. You know, Jupiter being conjunct this as well, it can expand your experience of the 12th house. And so this can be, you know, perhaps having sleep problems a little bit, or just, you know, where you're kind of excesses in terms of finances and the material world have just kind of taken their toll over the year, and actually it's a time to rest and recuperate. Perhaps there's been too much information for your body to kind of take in, and Gemini is very good at allowing energy to kind of flow in and flow out very quickly. Perhaps there's been a little bit of stagnation in terms of this full moon for you, and therefore information flowing through, maybe there's a blockage and it needs to be moved, and perhaps a bit of rest and extra sleep could help that to allow that energy to just pass through. I know typically for Geminis there is sometimes a bit of a problem with sleep. It's a little bit tricky to kind of switch the mind down, but perhaps accessing more information around mindfulness, or just the idea of getting into nature and grounding could be really positive for you. Not necessarily knowing why you're walking in the woods without any shoes on, but trusting that that is exactly what your body needs to kind of recalibrate at this time. The sextile from Saturn in Pisces, again, Gemini and Pisces, both mutable signs. There is some kind of long-term maturation energy coming through. So learning much more about yourself and your connection to nature, and how it really is there to support you. It's not there to kind of blindside you and kind of throw you off course. And maybe your connection with food as well, being a very Taurus theme, is really giving you some information about how you support your vessel, and listening to kind of any kind of food intolerances, for example, could be quite important for Gemini risings at this time. And you know, with Mercury and Mars and Scorpio opposing this full moon, Mercury's adding an extra element that Gemini likes, and so there are some facts amongst the weeds of this information that can kind of now be seen through this full moon light. And Mars, again, just be careful of any kind of emotional outbursts when it comes to sharing information with other people. Just kind of maybe take a step back if you suddenly feel triggered towards having an angry altercation with somebody. Maybe just take a step back, take 5 breaths, and think to myself, do I really want to say this? Is there any need to say this? Will it achieve anything, or is it just to hurt somebody else? Thinking that one through for Gemini risings. Cancer risings, this one will be taking place in your 11th house of friends, community, sometimes connected to social media, and our personal cheerleaders as well. This one, the 11th house, is known as the joy of Jupiter as well. So the aspect from retrograde Jupiter in Taurus with this eclipse, actually I feel is possibly really quite positive for Cancer risings. There are some opportunities coming around from social situations in terms of material stability. And it's like revisiting some of those potentially more positive financial situations that may have been playing out over the summer. With Venus in Virgo hosting this whole eclipse, there is some extra information here for you around the details of your home life and how they are informing your ability to kind of show up in a social setting, and kind of asking yourself the question, have I got the literal time? So like checking your diary, your planner, your Google Calendar, you know, have I literally got time to dedicate myself anymore to community efforts? Or have I been doing too much? That's a very Jupiter theme. Have I been doing too much in terms of community? And maybe I just need a bit of time to come back to myself, to nourish my home environment. Cancer very connected to the home and family. And how my, you know, Cancer being ruled by the moon is very connected to the body. So how is my body feeling with all of this socializing? Is it thriving, or is it actually kind of struggling and needing a little bit of a rest point? And so a full moon, as always, is really kind of like shining a light on the whole story of the last couple of years, actually, of your 11th house and social networks. And it could actually be bringing in an expansion of social networks, but just be mindful to check in with your kind of friendship health, as it were, and how your friendship health and your self health, that is really difficult to say, are working with one another. Are they in equilibrium, or are they feeling a little bit out of balance? And this full moon eclipse should be really giving you some information about how that's working out for you. Leo rising, this one will be taking place in your 10th house of career and public success. Leos, you guys have had a busy summer with the big Venus retrograde in Leo going on in your 10th house, Leo risings, that is. So big Venus retrograde in your first house of self, and now you've got this big full moon eclipse in your 10th house, shining a light on, you know, what is the material outcome of all my kind of reprocessing and redirecting that's been taking place over the summer. Again, thinking about the host being Venus in Virgo, the host of this eclipse being Venus in Virgo, how is this supporting me in terms of my health? Do I need to, you know, with Jupiter applying to this eclipse in Taurus as well through retrograde motion, I feels like there's some opportunities coming about, possibly from people who have been kind of supportive of your success and career in the past. Especially over the summer when we had Jupiter going through direct motion through this part of the sky, this part of the zodiac, and opportunities for growth and expansion, but also a kind of spiritual quest for Leo risings. You know, being a fixed fire sign at the ascendant, that means you've got a fixed earth at the top of the chart, and fixed signs are your bag, you know, because you've got fixed energy ruling your chart, and therefore there can be a real sense of like, what have I accomplished which stands the test of time? That also ties in really nicely with this sense of the sextile aspect to Saturn in Pisces, which is also retrograde at this point. So bringing in this idea of maturity and adulting. How have I been making sure that my Piscean needs, which is very much to do with intuition, psychic abilities, creativity, your relationship to music, the things that we feel without being able to kind of put a finger on where those things came from. You know, insights coming in just as we pick up a paintbrush and we put it to paper and, you know, see what comes alive from that experience or from that action. And so Saturn being retrograde, it's giving us this second hint of how that creative drive and our connection to sleep and dreams is so important in the bigger picture of who we are in terms of our career and how we want to be seen in the world and appreciated in the world, because the 10th house is so connected to a very, you know, the most visible part of the chart, up there at the top of the birth chart, very on show kind of at midday. That is the whole like literal geographical point, mathematical point of the MC, is that it's midday as opposed to the IC, which is midnight down here at the bottom of the chart, very private place. And so, you know, with Mercury and Mars in Scorpio opposing this, so with Mercury and Mars in Scorpio opposing this eclipse, there is a lot going on at that IC point, actually, at that midnight point at the bottom of the chart, that is informing an extra sense of inner power and having your own authority around your career at the moment. And also with Mars there, Mars is dignified in the sign of Scorpio, so it's adding a sense of determination to achieving your successes and a sense of willpower that is unlike no other sense of willpower in achieving those career goals at this time. Virgo rising, this Taurus eclipse will be taking place in your 9th house. Sorry, checking my notes. 9th house of higher education, spirituality, long distance travel, dreams, astrology even. And so Virgo risings, this one's quite exciting for you. It's a culmination point. It's a solidification of all of these 9th house themes, but also because the host of this eclipse being Venus in the sign of Virgo, there's something really feeding in to your 1st house here in terms of really knowing how to nourish yourself through the information coming from the 9th house. So really being able to nourish yourself through foreign cultures, through food from another country, through information and education coming from like spiritual guides, thinking about, you know, ancient texts and how they show up in our lives. Imagining like an ancient astrology book, that sounds delicious to me. And how maybe you're treating yourselves and expanding your own spiritual library as well. That could be really quite a big thing here. And how has that library, it could be a physical library or kind of metaphorical library, how has that library of knowledge been really growing over the last 2 years whilst the eclipses have been in Scorpio and Taurus? And how are you seeing a sense of nourishing your own body and your own sense of self and your own health through the added layer of spiritual sight and spiritual connection? Perhaps meditation has become a bit of a thing for you, and actually adding in meditation as a daily practice for you Virgo risings could really be helping to support your physical body at this time. You know, with Jupiter applying in retrograde motion back to this full moon eclipse in Taurus, there are some positive opportunities coming about in the 9th house for learning. Pay attention to, you know, if you've been wanting to sign up to a course, if you've been wanting, I just went to this forest school thing this morning with my 2-year-old, and I was just thinking this sort of thing should be available to adults, like who don't have access to like an outside garden space. And I don't quite know what that looks like, but, you know, perhaps it's a walk in the woods, perhaps it's a walk in the park, just reconnecting to nature. And Jupiter in Taurus offering that opportunity to expand your mind. I mean, Jupiter is also very connected to the 9th house. And so we've got this added oomph for you guys, Virgo, of really importing the sense of there must be something more than just the practical here and now, than the practical material reality that is kind of living on this earth. There's got to be something bigger than this, and there is a big kind of opportunity coming about in accepting that there is something, you know, that there is a higher power, or that nature is really our kind of spiritual guide. That could be a bit of a thing. Sextile aspect to Saturn in Pisces, adding this sense of maturity and longevity around, you know, personal finances and connection with another, and how your romantic relationships or your very, very close friendships, partnerships, business partnerships as well, are really starting to integrate in this idea of potentially kind of shared resources, financially supporting one another, but kind of asking of us to be a bit mature about the situation instead of just, you know, treating ourselves to whatever. There's this idea of like, you know, perhaps I should maybe check in with my partner and see if we've got enough in the budget for that right now. And that we're kind of doing this as a joint thing. And this isn't brand new conversations between you and your partner. This is things that have already been coming up while Saturn was direct in Pisces. Libra rising, this one will be taking place in your 8th house of other people's resources, the esteem of other people, and it can also connect to debts and monies that we owe to other people as well. But generally with the applying aspect, the applying kind of co-presence from Jupiter in Taurus with this full moon eclipse in Taurus, there is something quite beneficial that can come about from this eclipse point, and especially by the time that Jupiter retrogrades all the way back to where this eclipse point is, which I believe is kind of around about December time, then the kind of fruition of things it's almost like a knock-on effect. We get this full moon here on the 28th of October, which kind of illuminates really quite a lot in terms of our financial selves and our shared resources with other people, but also you know, how other people want to support you in your work and your financial situation. And then it's like Jupiter gets back to 5 degrees of Taurus around about December time, and there's an extra boost of like, actually no, this, you know, thinking about the fact that eclipse energies can last kind of, especially, you know, full moon energies can last like a few weeks and actually come to fruition in 6 months time. Eclipse energies are going through this whole, they will go in the 6-month cycle, but all this like 9-year cycle, 18-year cycle. So this is thinking about shared resources for the long term. You know, with Mercury and Mars and Scorpio opposing this eclipse, this is adding in extra information around the details of your finances, the details of how other people kind of see you, the details of, you know, those darker themes in life that we find it difficult to discuss, sometimes fears, sometimes shame, sometimes guilt. It can relate to sex and birth and death and those processes that we always have to traverse at various points in our lives. And this, because it's Taurus being personal resources, but it's in your 8th house of other people's resources, you may have found Libra risings that over your lifetime, the span of your lifetime, that actually financial support is something that naturally comes in for you guys from other people. It could be like a regular source of income. The fact that, I don't know, you're you know, maybe your parents set up like, what are those bonds, union bonds or something, when you were a child, and actually they kind of pay out dividends like once a year, and that was part of your personal resources, which you allow you to like pay for Christmas or birthdays or some big kind of celebration like that. Just be a little bit mindful around the fact that Mars in Scorpio can be a little bit spiky emotionally when it comes to this full moon, but also it adds a sense of drive and passion and willpower to kind of get things going, get the job done, and also because, you know, Scorpio lands in your 2nd house of personal resources, there's just a big activation here for your own financial setup. Sagittarius rising, this full moon Taurus eclipse will be landing in your 6th house of daily routines, health, co-workers. So the 6th house is typically a little bit of a challenging house in terms of it's just the stuff we have to do every day, like get dressed every day, put my socks on every day, put my shoes on every day, brush my teeth every day and get out to school. And it's like we don't get a reward for that. I'm just thinking about my 5-year-old at the moment who really struggles with doing those things every morning in time to get to school. And I don't do like a reward chart, but I've heard of other people doing that. It's probably, you know, a good idea for a 5-year-old. But as we grow up, as we're adults, no one's there sticking stars on our chart saying, well done for brushing your teeth, well done for feeding the kids. And it can feel a little bit like, oh, like I don't get any benefit from doing this, but I know I have to do this to be able to leave the house. That's a bit of a 6th house thing. And so You know, for Sagittarius, you know, this is a very kind of freedom loving, spontaneous, mutable fire sign. So fixed earth in the 6th house can feel really quite dull to a Sagittarius rising. Perhaps it's like you don't want to take stock of your own health scenarios, of the, you know, the arguments that are kind of constantly brewing with your co-workers, for example, or perhaps there's just a bit of a change needed in the work environment. The 6th house can be connected to work, very much in terms of like service to others and working for other people. And perhaps Sagittarius rising, it's a bit like, I'm really sick of working for other people and I just want to get out and do things on my own because I'm feeling it a bit restrictive and I need more freedom. I need more spiritual quest in my daily life, that kind of thing. Also, with Venus in Virgo ruling this eclipse, important to check in with your physical health. Have, you know, because Sagittarius rising Jupiter is this big lord of excess and he rules your whole birth chart, as because he rules the sign of Sagittarius. You know, maybe checking in with that more kind of sensible Venus in Virgo that's like, have I been doing too much? Have I been partying too much? Have I been spending too much? And now here's the reality that in a very 6th house way, I can't go out for 6 months because I've literally not got the finances to do that. But with Jupiter coming along, I mean, Jupiter can work in 2 ways. So Jupiter expands whatever it touches, so it can bring beneficence and positivity and good luck in terms of the 6th house. So it could be finding a new job, suddenly, you know, a new co-worker comes in that is really like quite fun to be around, or, you know, you're having a big kind of health payoff that because you've been eating flax seeds every day for the last 6 months, your body's responding really well. You know, maybe, I don't know, what are they good for? Constipation, there you go, and you haven't been constipated for 6 months. Who thought I would be mentioning constipation in this video? Not me. So yeah, and you know, there's a nice aspect to Saturn in Pisces. That just back to the idea of Jupiter. So Jupiter can support this eclipse for you in a positive sense, in that you've got that, you know, the flax seeds are kind of doing their job, or it can expand where the details of your daily routine have just become too much and they're a bit suffocating, and actually you need more financial freedom, you need more independence in your own job. And so then Saturn in Pisces making a sextile aspect to this full moon eclipse is adding in a little bit of extra information around what is it that you really love. There's something in there, Sag rising. There's this sense of intuition of, I know what it is that I want. I know what my dreams are saying to me. Pisces very connected to dreams. And Saturn in Pisces retrograde at the moment, really asking us to take our dreams seriously and take the Pisces part of our birth chart really seriously. And so for Sag rising, where are we? Sag, Cap, Aquarius, Pisces, 4th house, asking you to really take your roots seriously and your tribe seriously. You know, perhaps you really feel a call, Sag. I mean, when does a Sag rising not feel cool to go on a quest, go out traveling, travel the world? But maybe there's a real call to kind of really reconnect with your tribe, or find your tribe if you've never felt connected to a tribe in a particular area. Maybe there's some very ancestral information coming through very intuitively that is guiding you onto a new path and a new adventure. Again, with Mercury and Mars in Scorpio opposing this eclipse, just be wary of any arguments with co-workers, and also the way that you're communicating with other people. Maybe kind of check in every now and again. Are you jumping into communications a bit too quickly, kind of speaking before you think? That's quite a Sagittarius thing as it is. And accidentally upsetting people, and that was never your intention. So maybe just taking a breath, recalibrating and thinking, is it really worth me saying this, or is it really not going to help anybody involved in this party, including myself? Capricorn risings, this Taurus eclipse will be taking place in your 5th house of children, creativity, romance and love affairs. I like the 5th house. The 5th house is where we have fun. And so for Capricorn rising, this Taurus in the 5th house is just like, okay, so where's my how am I connecting to nature? How am I working up at the allotment every week now? And that is really, you know, it can just be like, here I am, you know, the fifth house connects really nicely to the first house. And so for you guys, Capricorn, this is quite a flowy energy for this eclipse. Full moonlight shining on, you know, it can just be that example. I'm just muddling up my thoughts here. Imagine you're standing at the allotment and you're just feeling really grateful that you have this place of nature that is yours, you know, this allotted space of earth, soil, Mother Nature. Perhaps there's a few trees there. You're open to the elements, but perhaps there's a place that you can protect yourself from the elements as well. Perhaps you've got a shed there that has your favourite waterproofs and you like nothing more than going to the allotment at the weekend and working hard on your own land and just in really enjoying that sense of earthly connection to this material world and really feeling blessed to be living in this material world and surrounded by Mother Nature's resources at her most kind of precious. Also thinking of like pumpkin harvests and things like this. Perhaps you've been working hard. Capricorn's so very good at keeping at something without anybody really knowing about it, but just plodding along. And then you see this fruition at the full moonlight, this eclipse light of, wow, look what I've created. Also very connected to children because it is that ultimate sense of creativity. And so perhaps your children are doing well at this time, with Jupiter applying to this eclipse as well. Imagining children off at university, for example, or getting much more into dream symbolism and their connection to spiritual teachers. Perhaps that's a nice thing to share with your children as well. Sharing a spiritual practice together that is, I'm imagining actually my son, who's got moon in Taurus, loves to cook with me in the kitchen. And when we do it together, my older son would never stay in the kitchen. He would just get bored too quickly. But my Taurus moon son will stay in the kitchen with me, and he loves a job and he loves to connect. And when we're in that space together, it feels spiritual. It doesn't feel like we're just getting the dinner cooked. It feels so much deeper than that. And this can be very linked to your experience of this full moon for you guys, Capricorn rising. Yeah, because Jupiter is applying back in a retrograde motion to this eclipse point. There's some opportunities coming about now that have some longevity that will be coming kind of, you know, there's beneficial stuff now at this eclipse, and then there's beneficial stuff coming down the road around about December time as well. So paying attention to opportunities that are coming in terms of spiritual education, spiritual fun, and also connecting potentially, you know, if you're in the market for a new lover, perhaps, you know, being out in nature, you know, chatting to your local farmer, something like that, somebody that you've seen every day for the last 12 years, but you've never quite dared speak to them. Perhaps you go and talk to them, realise they're single, and you end up going out on a date with them, for example. That could be quite an exciting one for you guys, Capricorn rising. And then we've got an aspect to Saturn in Pisces, which is also retrograde. So this is connecting to, you know, the fact that this isn't a brand new farmer that you've just seen, but it is the farmer that you've seen for many, many years. Saturn very connected with this sense of time and maturity, and kind of, because it's in retrograde motion, it's like revisiting some part of your life. And then Saturn in Pisces kind of giving you that sense of personal responsibility around your own dreams and wishes. So like, you know, getting that courage, because Mars and Mercury are in Scorpio opposing this eclipse. That gives you that real drive to kind of, and passion to be able to actually speak and say those words. Like, you know, I keep imagining this idea of like being in the school playground and asking a boy, you know, will you go out with me? Do you remember doing that like so many years ago? Oh my God, nothing more terrifying, like from my own perspective. But this Mars in Scorpio gives you that courage and that drive, like, yeah, no, I'm going to do it. And I'm perfectly entitled to take this risk and believe that my dreams can manifest. And Pisces, Saturn in Pisces, just honouring that, you know, you are maturing all the time and you are taking a mature response or a mature approach to your dreams and what you would love to exist in your romantic life. Aquarius rising, this full moon Taurus eclipse will be taking place in your 4th house of roots, family, can be connected to the home as well. So living environment, you know, there can be a bit of a maybe like a house move, but more so perhaps a building or a renovation project that has been taking so long to complete, and finally at this full moon everything's in, everything's done, and you can get around to decorating. You can, like, Venus in Virgo ruling this eclipse, meaning that the details of decoration can now come into play, and you can finally decorate that extension, or you can decorate that room that's been empty for a while and you've been thinking, what are we going to do with that space? You know, perhaps a child's moved out of home, or perhaps you know, you had an office space and you wanted to repurpose it for something else, like a craft room, something like that, and you're just giving a bit of Venusian you know, Venusian pleasures. So putting some finances towards a, you know, a decoration project, putting some you know, buying some paint that has an added aroma or something. You know, like imagining like you know, strawberry smelling paint or something. Does that exist? You get those pens, don't you? Gel pens that have smells added to them. I'm just thinking Taurus being very much of the senses. I'm imagining people now paint Aquarius risings decorating with like lemon sherbet paint and just being like, smells so good. But activating your connection to senses within the home. Also, you know, because you are a fixed sign at the ascendant, this means that fixed sign full moon eclipses can feel more stabilizing to you than perhaps to other modalities of sign, you know, cardinal or mutable. Fixed signs like other fixed signs. And so for Taurus being here in your 4th house, perhaps it's really getting stuck into a research project around your family tree, or tracing your heritage, and, you know, seeing how far back you can go. Can you go back to like tribal times? I mean, wouldn't that be incredible? But I get that impression, you know, sometimes, you know, where we live in the world can just feel so like of the material experience that's right in front of us, and yet we have all of this tribal ancestry that is so deeply buried down down in that 4th house, that very kind of secretive midnight point of the birth chart, the most private house arguably of the birth chart. And yet if we were born into a tribal family now, we would probably know our lineage going back, you know, hundreds of years. I don't know if that's true, but I'm sure I've watched documentaries where it would imply that might be the case. And so perhaps visiting, you know, a tribal space, getting involved in really ancient ways of being and connected to the earth. So ancient ways of farming, doing things the slow way, connecting to that slow, solid, fixed element of Taurus, and just because this is a full moonlight and we've got Jupiter applying in retrograde motion, it's bringing about opportunities that are coming from where you've been putting in this hard work and effort connected to the land and nature over the last little while. And then we've got a second kind of hit from Jupiter, positive hit, hopefully, around about December time, when Jupiter finally gets back to the degree point of 5 degrees where this eclipse point is. So it's like the first bit of Jupiter, we get a second injection of it in December as well. So that's looking quite nice. And Venus in Virgo hosting this eclipse for you, Aquarius risings. There is this sense of applying healthy routines to your home life and your ancestry and, you know, connections with family. And Pisces rising, last but not least, this full moon eclipse will be taking place in your 3rd house of living environment, siblings, communication, and information gathering, basically learning. This is a learning house. 3rd house very connected to writing. So if you've been working on any writing projects, Pisces rising, this can be a really beautiful full moon eclipse, showing how you have brought that writing into a material form and you're being honoured in a material sense for it. You know, perhaps you're receiving some reward for your writing projects, your creative projects. Perhaps you are having, your siblings are having a very positive experience when it comes to personal finances, or business, and or perhaps your siblings have now gained some plot of land and they are wanting to share that with you. And you know, Jupiter applying in retrograde motion to this Taurus eclipse. We've got this first point at the eclipse on the 28th of October, where there's some opportunities coming about that can support financial situations, or it can support more solid, you know, fully committing perhaps to a learning, a course of study. Perhaps you're taking a course and this eclipse can really kind of solidify, because this is the last Taurus eclipse for the next 9 years. There is this sense of really kind of seeing what has come to fruition from your dedicated writing practice, your dedicated, you know, how you are at home, the things that you do at home, and how those very kind of fixed Taurus things, how you love to have really beautiful soft furnishings around you, for example, how those things are really supportive of your own health at this time. There's also a sextile aspect from Pisces, Saturn in Pisces, which is retrograde at the moment. So this will be feeding back to your first house of health and vitality. And so there's a strong connection here with living environment and self. Or perhaps you've outgrown your living environment and it's become stifling and too much. And what you want is the opportunity to move, but you can't quite see how that might happen. And then Jupiter comes along and applies by a, you know, a conjunction or a co-presence to this Taurus eclipse, and it's bringing in opportunities that are very connected to fate, you know, chance, meetings with other people. Great, you know, eclipses are always great beginnings and great endings. Or this is like wrapping up a relationship with somebody else and finally saying goodbye to that joint resource of a home, for example, and deciding that actually you've outgrown your home. You know, Jupiter likes to expand whatever it touches, so perhaps your kind of, your sense of passion and purpose and spiritual quest is too big for the walls that kind of keep you hemmed in at this time. And perhaps what you really need is to go on a trip and find what else is out there. And, you know, perhaps there's new romance coming into the mix as well. And it's really kind of feeding back to who you are as a person. Mercury and Mars are in Scorpio opposing this eclipse. So just be aware of angry words that might be spoken, but also mental health can be a little bit fluctuating at this time. But there's also a real sense of passion and drive that's feeding in and giving energy towards any kind of spiritual quest that you're going on, anything connected to like tarot or psychic connections. And Pisces rising being the, you know, arguably one of the most spiritual rising signs anyway, that spirituality is a big part of your life potentially, or anything connected to music or just that creative flow that is very necessary to allow your body to thrive. And if that living environment around you is not allowing your body to thrive, perhaps staying open to the idea that something else might be coming in now, allowing you to kind of move on, which can be quite challenging when you've got Taurus ruling the third house, because the idea of home and family life would need to be something that feels quite secure to you. But if that security is becoming stifling and not allowing your soul to really expand and, you know, take in as much of this life as is possible, then, you know, then perhaps it's time to be looking at something else, or perhaps it's time to just redecorate the whole house. And perhaps you're out there buying the paint to do the redecoration project, because Venus in Virgo is the host of this eclipse, and Virgo is a Mercury ruled sign, so it loves the details of Venusian things. So what paint colours am I choosing? I'm like seeing, like, you know, those paint cards and just lining them up in the kitchen whilst you're having your morning coffee and kind of going, okay, that colour and that colour go together, and you know, perhaps my ex or my kids always really hated the colour green and I love the colour green, and now I'm just going to totally feed into that love of green and allow myself to fully celebrate. You know, especially with Taurus ruling there as well, you know, like bringing in loads of pot plants as well, and very connected to green in the outside space, bringing the outside space inside, perhaps being more connected to a greenhouse in your garden or a conservatory where you really like to fill it up with, like, imagining it like a potting shed or something like that, and just allowing yourself to really nourish yourself through your connection with nature. Thanks so much for joining, and I'll see you next time in the next video. Hi Scorpio, this Taurus lunar eclipse will be falling in your 7th house of one-to-one relationships, and this house can contain your marriage partner, your romantic partner, a long-term life partner. It can contain people that you work with, so if you work on a one-to-one basis with people, with clients, then your clients also live here. It can also be really close friendships, close relationships that you have in your life, important relationships where we find an area of life that is a kind of projected area of life. So it's the opposite house. The 7th house is the opposite house to the 1st house, where we find us and self, and in the 7th house we find them and other. And in this way it can feel sometimes a little bit alien from us, because it's like all these things that we don't necessarily see of ourselves through our own lens, but we have to, or we choose to, learn about these areas of life. In this example of this eclipse, Taurus areas of life, so Taurus archetypes, through another person, because we find it hard to access that part of ourselves sort of within us. Obviously, if you have like a Taurus sun or something like that, a personal planet, maybe Mercury or or Venus in Taurus, then you might have more of an access to Taurus. But because it is ruling your 7th house, it is an area of life that is needing to be recognized and realized and kind of brought about into reality, manifested through connections with another. And so with this eclipse happening here, there may be big culmination points around relationships. There can be new relationships beginning, very much so. This can be definitely signaled by this eclipse point. There can also be relationships ending, as we see the full moonlight shining on this whole area of our lives. We've also got Mercury and Mars in Scorpio quite close, opposing this eclipse, which is really firing you up as a Scorpio rising in terms of having lots of sort of mental insights, being able to see straight through to the truth of a situation. Scorpio, as you're probably aware, is really good at really just being able to pick up on a vibe and go with it, and know that they can trust their gut instincts about a situation. And so when Mercury and Mars get together, it's like the mental processes are kind of infused with this urge to kind of act and do and respond. And so if there's something that you've been thinking about for a while, but haven't perhaps acted upon, then now's the time. This doesn't necessarily have to be a negative thing. It can just be that you're absolutely certain in your convictions that that you must be with this other person, that you want to start a new relationship with them, and that's very exciting. The host of this eclipse is Venus, because Venus rules Taurus. Venus is currently in Virgo, as it was for the previous eclipse, the Libra eclipse that we had on the 14th, also hosted by Venus, Venus in Virgo. Venus has been in Virgo for a while now, after our very lengthy Venus in Leo all throughout the summer months, which was a massive transit. Very significant for Scorpio risings in terms of career and possibly public connections of love, like marriage and children. They can often live in the 10th house as well, because it's the place where we have the most light and the things that we are known for. But definitely creative areas of life being in a spotlight focus for us over the summer months. And now we've got Venus in Virgo, which is not quite as a comfortable a place for Venus to be, because Venus loves to be in Pisces, the opposite sign, but it struggles a bit in Virgo because it's relying on Mercury to, you know, for extra information, for like clues on how to behave. But there is a kind of mitigating factor here because Mercury is currently in Scorpio. So actually, whereas previously in the Libra eclipse we had Mercury in Libra, functioning in this very kind of diplomatic, like I mustn't say this thing and I mustn't say that thing. Now we've got Mercury in Scorpio with that Mars in Scorpio as well. There's some real kind of conviction and courage behind what it is that you want to say and what it is that you need to get out, and the conversations that just need to take place. And there's lasting change from the interactions that you have around this eclipse point, because Scorpio is a fixed water sign. So lasting emotional change, lasting relationships beginning, relationships ending, one-to-one client work, you know, really finding your kind of true match when it comes to client work and deciding that you're going to work together for the next few months or a solid amount of time, you know, not just a one-off, but, you know, maybe you're going to work with someone over the next 12 months, and that's a very solid thing that will have longevity, lasting power. Yeah, and then we've got a sextile from this eclipse to Saturn in Pisces as well, and Pisces ruling your 5th house. There's a connection here between those one-to-one relationships and potentially children or creative life. The 5th house being the area of life where we like to have fun, and with Saturn going through the 5th house, sometimes fun can be slightly kind of curbed because Saturn likes to add in rules and restrictions. So perhaps you're finding that the things that you usually like to do, maybe you like to go for a hike in the woods. And perhaps at the moment, hiking in the woods is actually causing your knees to hurt a bit because Saturn rules the structures of the body, so knees. And it can be putting those barriers in place, can bring up annoying restrictions, but there's lessons to be learned from those restrictions. Is your body requiring you to take more rest? And because you are a Mars ruled sign, Scorpio ruling your chart, being a Scorpio rising, Mars rules Scorpio. Mars is in Scorpio right now, so very dignified. I really like this one for Scorpios in terms of you know, self, what's that word, like reinvigorating yourself and knowing that deep in yourself you have this power that is like no other sign out there, and really able to kind of command your own life and steer it in a direction that you would like it to go. And so with that Saturn in Pisces in the 5th house, in sextile to this Taurus eclipse, paying attention to you know, where you sometimes maybe need to just kind of walk before you can run. That Mars in Scorpio kind of driving a lot of this eclipse is, or opposing a lot of this eclipse, is like that kind of will, that willpower kind of will kind of go over everything else. And sometimes that's really positive, but other times that willpower can sometimes be to the detriment of something else. And so if you're finding that actually your knee does hurt from hiking too much, then maybe kind of pull it back a bit and tell yourself, you know, actually, you know, in a few weeks' time, if I rest now, then I'll get a longer term health benefit from taking little bits of rest now, instead of just pushing through it and thinking, no, that doesn't hurt, that doesn't hurt. And then, you know, having to have like a full knee replacement or something in, you know, months or years to come because you kind of just kept going. But yes, and creative projects can be really camera wobble, can be really emphasized at this time with that Saturn in Pisces, and it's retrograde as well, about to turn direct as well. So there's things that you've been working on kind of behind the scenes, possibly anything to do with intuition, creativity, art, music, writing, that can now, you know, move on to the next phase, and it's needed this time to kind of assimilate before you can move it on to that next phase. And that, because it's a Taurus eclipse and it's that fixed earth, whatever it is that you're building now or working on creatively right now can really kind of, again, go the test of time, because it's in this fixed earth sign and it wants to be of the material world. It wants to be here, it wants to exist, it wants to be kind of born into reality. So that's your Taurus eclipse horoscopes, Scorpio rising.